sodium, too much sugar, and figure out, like, one time I did it, and I was like, why is my sugar content shooting up at night? And I realized I was, for a month, I was eating a pack of Fig Newtons every night.
Good evening. I'd like to call this Wednesday, February 14th, 2024 meeting of the City of Manassas Park Planning Commission to order. The time is 7 p.m. My name is Lester Finkel. Sitting this evening are Kevin Petak, John Evans, Alana Mensing, and Michael Beckett's. The first order of business is the moment of silence and Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Petak, will you lead us, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Let's all join in a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Any changes to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, would anyone care to make a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Motion, second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item is the adoption of minutes for the January 10th, 2024 meeting. I don't have any edits to offer. Are there any edits from other commissioners? Seeing none, would anyone care to make a motion to adopt the minutes as is?
Moved.
Motion, second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Are there any members of the public present to speak this evening? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move along. The main item of business is a discussion for the fiscal year 2025 to fiscal year 2029 capital improvement program. We'll have our discussion item. I'll turn it over to Laszlo. Whenever you're ready, sir, you may proceed.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Commission. I'm going to be going over the CIP presentation, but before I do that, I just want to check this. Everyone know how to find the comprehensive plan on the website? If you don't, please get with me afterwards. I will show you how to do that, because that's one critical thing as a planning commission, right? You're supposed to look at the comprehensive plan, right, and evaluate that and evaluate the CIP in terms of fulfilling the comprehensive plan. Unfortunately, as you know, the chairman has noted, the comp plan is a bit outdated,
Yes.
right? So
Yep.
You'll see one of the projects we have tonight.
My apologies, I forgot to turn this thing on.
Okay.
One of the projects we have tonight is actually to update the comp plan next year, to actually bring on outside consultants
Thank you.
to take a comprehensive review of it, and that usually involves public engagement, right? Potentially creating resident groups for each chapter. You don't have to do it that way, right? We'll have a consultant come in and provide recommendations, but it's supposed to be a pretty thorough process. When I went through a comprehensive review in my prior jurisdiction, it was about an 18-month process, and we had committees for every single chapter made up of residents and, of course, staff and the outside contractor who provided their kind of best practices, best recommendations, updating the data for us when it comes to each chapter. So with an outdated comp plan, unfortunately, it's up to you to really just evaluate these projects and say, do these have good community value or not, right? That's kind of really what you can do right now. What I'm presenting tonight is not a financial model. I'm showing you guys numbers, but the financial model is going to be presented in April. I get my real estate assessment data at the end of March, and then I have to turn around a budget within a week to the governing body, so I don't know what my revenues are. So that week is hell for me always, where I have to kind of turn around things and brief to the governing body my full budget, including the full CIP model. And that's where you guys, when I come back to brief you guys in April, I will show you guys revenues as well, over expenditures, so you have a full understanding of kind of the financial model. But the point of tonight is really to look at the projects, right? So we're not going to go over every single project like we've done over the last few years. We've done that a lot. So we're not here to bore everyone to death. I thought it was important to do so a few years ago, just to kind of get the community on understanding kind of all the projects that we do. But you have it tonight in your packet. You have every single project that's in the CIP. So we're going to do a Q&A once I'm done briefing kind of the overview of the CIP. We'll do a Q&A. We have all the department directors here. So if you have a question about a police project, we have the chief here. Same thing with fire, general services, facilities, schools. We have Mr. David Lyon here. So we have the team here assembled to answer any specific questions based off the specific project. But I'll go over the kind of a summary of the entire model. So the only thing that I'm briefing tonight is this, the 5-year model for the general fund and the enterprise funds. And then the backup slides are, again, for reading only, and then for Q&A, for you guys to ask any questions. You guys have had the projects. We got the remaining 7 slides, I believe, to you all Monday night for the remaining projects as well. So we have every project listed in here, individual slides kind of describing the justification and our best effort to align it to the current comprehensive plan in terms of finding a justification for the current comprehensive plan. So there's about 3 additional slides on here tonight that you're not going to have in your packet, right? But those are just kind of things that I've done to kind of highlight a few things, because you'll notice the numbers are a lot bigger this year than last year. So I kind of want to touch on that. So in terms of the 5-year CIP model, you can see kind of in total, it's about $190 million over 5 years. The biggest chunk of that is transportation, $101 million. So what's important to remember with transportation is out of this $101.6 million, only $1.6 million is actually city-funded initiatives, right, that aren't approved for external sources of revenue, right? These are initiatives that we've discussed between the governing body, recommendations from me about helping out with downtown development issues or specific intersections that we want to look at, right, or signage, right? Like a good example from last year was the no commercial overnight parking, right? That's not eligible for outside transportation funding. But again, $100 million out of this $101.6 million is externally funded. It doesn't impact taxpayers. So the bigger this number, it's actually a good story for our residents, because it means we're bringing in funding, right? Thanks to Calvin and his team. They're bringing in a lot of funding from the federal government and the state, right? A huge win. You see this big number here in FY28? That's the Route 28 Innovative Intersections Project. To start improving your experience when you drive on Route 28. That was a huge win for our team, partnering with Delegate Rome and VDOT to secure funding for that project, right? So overall, again, you have about $101.6 million for transportation. Other highlights specifically for FY25, that big number, $19 million. The biggest chunk of that is the VRE, the downtown garage here. But again, that's grant funded. We received $9 million between 2 different grant sources to cover the inflation overrun for that project. That project was not going to happen until Calvin and his team was able to secure $9 million in grants to save that downtown garage. So that was huge. There's HSIP funding there, which is safety enhancements along the Manassas Drive corridor as well. That's close to $2 million. You have Manassas Drive resurfacing, which we're not confirmed we have that yet, but that's something that we apply for every year, and we assume we're going to get it because we're eligible for that funding, where the entire section of Manassas Drive from Signal View Drive to the western limits of the city get resurfaced through VDOT funding. Okay, so that's, again, not taxpayer money. That's huge. That's our main road. So we're hoping, and we apply for that every single year because there's an eligibility list based off of specific routes across the state. So that's kind of a placeholder. It may be pulled off, right, when we get the word that we're not getting it this year, but we're going to keep trying to get that aggressively each year. So those are kind of the biggest projects that making up that $19 million. And then in FY29, the big project there, again, that's going to be grant dependent, right? And that's going to be the Connor Drive South extension, which you'll see that project on the list as down below. For police, spending is about $2.5 million across the 5-year model. The biggest funding sources specifically for FY29 are updated radios, which are critically important if you ever witness some of the active shooter drills that we have in our schools, right? Which is really the #1 priority in terms of public safety for our city, is making sure that if there's ever an active shooter in our schools, our police are able to respond effectively and neutralize that threat to save as many kids and teachers as we can. So radios are critical for that. If you go in our schools, the communications are challenging. When we do our drills, the #1 issue we have is not the competency of our officers. They are amazing. It's their ability to communicate back to command, and command has to coordinate between all the different teams that are checking hallway by hallway across the school systems. And so radios are a key component of that. The fire department was able to find some pretty good radios that can tap into Wi-Fi signals, data signals from Verizon, AT&T. If for whatever reason the radio communication is struggling as well, it taps into different sources. That's what we want to do for police as well. Night vision goggles is another piece that's in FY25 as well for the police department. For fire, across the 5 years, it's about $4.2 million for them. The two biggest items are purchase of an ambulance and then replacement of the ladder truck. What's happening right now with all of our assets, fire engines, ambulances, we order them. So for the ladder truck, the replacement we're putting in FY28. It doesn't mean we need it in 28, right? We're expecting to get an FY30 because right now it's a 2-year minimum lag time from when we place the order until we get the actual engine or ambulance or ladder truck. That's just how the world is operating now, unfortunately. It's been how we've dealt with every single ambulance and engine that we've had over the last few years. But those are the biggest items. Again, we saved the city a ton of money by buying the Manassas ladder truck at a very low rate, but that again was already an older asset. We need to replace it by FY30. That's the goal, but we need to put in the purchase by FY28. For Parks and Rec, you have about skipped Calvin's department. Community Development is about $3.4 million total. The biggest item in FY25 is SCADA. That's ARPA funded, and then we're also using some water and sewer funds for SCADA. SCADA is just a technology system that allows every water or sewer asset to communicate back to the team so that hopefully on their mobile platforms, right, they will have a signal when a pump station fails or anything like that. They get a water tank issue, they'll get it on their phone, essentially what the issue is. They'll be able to see it and head over quickly to address that. That's what a SCADA system is, and we put that in our ARPA budget and also our water and sewer budget as well. So that's the biggest spending item for the Community Development Department. For Parks and Rec, it's about $8.8 million across the 5 years. The overwhelmingly biggest projects there are going to be all the Signal Hill Park renovation stuff. We plan on using ARPA money to cover most of it, so that's going to be a brand new water park, the facility for the water park. If you guys ever want to take a tour, please let us know, and so you can actually see the condition of that facility and why it needs to be replaced. Same thing with the pavilion. The pavilion is very old. The bathrooms very old. The tennis courts need to be replaced. We already replaced the basketball courts this year. We replaced the playgrounds, but those are kind of the remaining things. We're also evaluating lighting, so I'm adding some lights, at least for the 30 minutes when the sun goes down and people are still at the park kind of getting out for enhanced safety. But adding lighting will also in the future allow us, if we can ever do turf fields, to have evening programs as well. You'll see turf fields here, about $2 million in FY25. As a reminder, this is a wish list CIP right now. This isn't the final CIP that I'm going to be presenting to the governing body, because that has to be balanced, right? So we look at what we can afford. That's a project that I'm not sure is going to survive. So there's going to be a few of those that you'll see tonight that we just don't have the means to pay for. The biggest one, of course, is going to be the high school renovation project, which is going to be a big source of conversation that I'm going to have with the governing body, both in open and closed session, because I have some ideas in closed session for how we can actually address the high school as well, that I'll be talking to the governing body here in the next couple of months to help fund that project. Same thing with the fire station addition as well. That's another big project that we have to take on. All these projects, again, we have to balance the CIP, so we may not be able to fund a lot of these projects that we believe are important projects, but they become unfunded capital liabilities is what we call them. And as we get more success with economic development, we're able to do more. And I'll show you kind of how we have been able to do more. I'm going to kind of circle back to what life was like back in fiscal year 19 and what it's like today, okay, in a few slides. And then schools is about $42.1 million, but the biggest item is going to be that high school renovation project. The other big ticket items are going to be the middle school roof and the middle school HVAC unit as well. So again, all of our schools, were built between 1999 and roughly 2009-ish, right? So they're now reaching that point, right? Especially in 1999, you're thinking about 2029, already 30 years, right? So that's when major renovations really start coming up, is at that 30-year mark. And we always knew that. Even back in 2019, when we were looking at what to do with our debt situation and doing a lot of debt refinancing, the goal was to build debt capacity by FY30 so we could start tackling major, not just school renovations, but police station renovations, fire station additions, right, renovations, community center renovations, right, all those things in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. We were planning a debt capacity. Unfortunately, there's two things that hit us because of COVID. Anyone know what those two things are? that have made life much more challenging now to do capital projects?
Inflation's one.
Inflation and interest rates, right? You look at 40-year interest rates, we're kind of more at the norm right now. So it seems like the last decade was kind of artificially low compared to the last 40 years. So is this the new norm? And if it is, then our debt financing in the future becomes more expensive because of rising prices and higher interest rates when we go out to borrow. So that means that our prior projections for what we could do in 2030 and 2040 have completely changed. And that's a conversation I have to have with the governing body about what do we do about that, right? We have all these renovation projects. How are we going to fund them, right? That's the key point there. So that's a big schools discussion there. That's going to be critical. Administration and general services, that's a big item. That's IT. That's all our facilities, right? So that's where like the fire station addition is going to be, all of our fleet. That's the category that goes there. The biggest item in that section in 25 is going to be the purchase of a building for Public Works, for Calvin's department, the Community Development and Public Works. Right now they're separated. Some are at the Bloom's offices. Some are at the Public Works building. I ask you again to go tour that Public Works building if you're ever interested to see the condition of that building that has to be at least from the 1960s, if not before, right? That used to be the fire station and police station for the city in the old town. That's the oldest building. Everyone else was addressed. Even this building fixed City Hall, right, for $0 for taxpayers, right? That's the strategy. So even though I have funding here, right, think of it as kind of borrowing. We're lending money for the project. I have a development project that's going to come up for rezoning here shortly, being done by D.R. Horton. That's going to pay for that building. That's the model I go with, is for any new buildings, I have a development project to pay for, so taxpayers don't have to pony up. So in this case, in City Hall, it was $0 the whole way, right? In this one, we're loaning ourselves money in the interim until that project kind of pays for it. So that's how that one's working. So that, again, is about $27 million across all those 5 years, and you can see kind of the note down there about some of the major projects I just discussed. When looking at it across the 5 years, it's about $190 million for the general fund. 53% of that is transportation, 22% is schools that we talked about, facilities and grounds, community development and parks and rec combined. We talked about what projects those were. $6.8 million for public safety, $5.4 million for fleet, and then $3 million for your overhead, not counting your facilities or fleet. So that's kind of more the administrative overhead, including funding for our grants consultant who's helped us secure a lot of this money that now has expanded our CIP. So this is a slide that's on your packet, so don't flip to it. You're not going to find it unless Lana inserted it. But I did this this afternoon, so I doubt Lana had that. But I'll get that to you, Lana, here shortly. So the FY24 general fund CIP was about $43.8 million, right? When you don't include transportation. I'm going to talk about why we don't include transportation here a bit. In FY25, it's $88.6 million. That's a huge increase. But like I just said, the $43.8 million was the final CIP. This is our wish list where we're showing certain capital items that we feel need to be done, but are not going to survive the CIP round. I can just tell you that right now. They're going to be removed. The actual CIP at a max is going to be $50.5 million, but that also still includes the turf fields in Signal Hill Park. That likely won't survive, right? There's going to be things that are going to it's going to be more than $43.8 million. I'm going to discuss at the end of my presentation why it's going to be more, why it's going up, right? There's a specific reason for that when I'm going to circle back to fiscal year 19 in terms of where we were then, the actions we took then, how they're coming back to haunt us now, but how we knew they were going to do that, and living in this reality that we are right now. Okay, so it's going to be, I'm guessing somewhere more like $47-ish million. But again, I don't have revenue projections. Revenues could come in a lot stronger, and we can afford more, right? But it's just going to depend on revenues. We always have a balanced budget here, and actually we have budget surpluses. That's how we operate the city. So removing transportation from this comparison makes sense because, again, transportation isn't funded by city taxpayers. So if it goes up, that's a good news story. It means our staff is doing a great job of getting federal and state money to improve our transportation network, which is a big priority. Every time I do a town hall, the number one issue now is not schools in terms of the impacts on schools because enrollment's declining, right? What's the number one issue I hear about in town halls? Concerns. Traffic, right? We have to fix our transportation network. So we're very lucky to have Steve and Calvin and his team as part of our staff, and they're helping to really secure a lot of funding to tackle this transportation issue head on. So water and sewer, we talked about one of the biggest projects in FY25 was the SCADA system, but also the additional funding for the community development building as well, which you can see in this facility sections over here. So we show debt here as well for water and sewer, so you can just kind of see what we're spending in terms of debt capacity for water and for sewer. UOSA is our sewer, and our water is our water debt, of course. So that's the majority of this model here, but I take it out of the full analysis because that's really more of a debt analysis. But I like to show you here kind of what our debt position is for water and sewer. But that's about 64% of the numbers shown here. 4.3 million is really the meat and potatoes. That's the maintenance of our water and sewer system over 5 years. And 1.7 million is for all the system enhancements that we're going to do, and that's really upgrading our water lines. And you can see those slides. They're called Phase 6, Phase 7 in the back of the presentation. Facilities, we talked about that, and then for other categories like equipment, the trucks they utilize, et cetera, for the water and sewer fund. Stormwater is our smallest capital fund. It was going to be our largest if we had to do the Russia Branch Stream Restoration Project. We pivoted from doing that. We found a much better candidate in the bird sanctuary stream restoration, which is part of the Blooms Park. So we've been working with the HOA to be able to do that, and we're close to actually securing an earmark from the federal government to fund that project. It's gone through the House. It's in the discussions now in the reconciliation bill between the Senate and the House. But we're confident, we're hopeful we're going to get the earmark, and that will help reduce this spending even more. Well, actually, we'll just bring revenue to pay for this, so it's not stormwater fees to pay for, because there's a lot more stormwater maintenance that we have to do that we're just not funding right now, because we have to tackle first our pollutant reduction goals that the EPA sets for us. So total spending across all enterprise funds, $203.9 million. You can see $5.6 million in ARPA. You can see how this breaks down again. The majority, transportation, schools, and facilities, is about 80% of all this. And again, some of these big ticket items may not survive the CIP. Okay. And you can see kind of all the different breakdown which you guys have in front. So again, you don't have this slide, but I would try to summarize so you can see how it stacks up with FY24. FY24 total, not including transportation, but all the enterprise funds, general fund, $57.7 million. This year it's $64.4 million when you just remove those two projects, right? The school renovation project and the fire station addition, which we believe we have to do. But again, I have to have a conversation with governing body about how do we pay for that, right? Because right now we don't have the money for these projects, okay? Other things that, there's still other projects in there that may have to be pushed back beyond the 5-year CIP as well. Right now, it's just, the purpose of this is to show the community all the different capital liabilities that we have or other enhancements that we feel would help improve the community, right? That's what we have here in tonight's presentation. Then again, we already talked about the transportation. So this is also not there, but this is kind of taking us back to FY19. So remember how I showed you that we have like a roughly $50 million CIP right now? It was $11 million in FY19. Okay, police and Parks and Rec for 2 years were $0. Okay, that's the situation we were dealing with. We were literally in negative $1 million position. The state was on our back. We were under fiscal distress watch. I had to go down to Richmond and brief the staff there about what the plan was to turn around our finances. We were going to hit peak debt in FY19, so we had to trim the budget down to tackle that debt position head on. But that's where we were before. And you look at every other jurisdiction, they were spending a lot more back then. And we had to play catch up now. So at that time, I told the governing body, here's what's going to happen. Well, this is unsustainable. Things are going to start breaking down, right? And we're going to have to fix them, right? Also, things were cheaper to do back then. And I called it. I said, there's always inflation. Now, I didn't know COVID was going to happen and the inflation would be even worse, right? But we knew that prices tomorrow would be more than they were back then, and we'd be paying more for stuff in the future. We just didn't have any ability to pay for it back then. But again, we had no choice. We had decisions to make back then. Did we cut employees or did we cut capital? And we chose to keep our most valuable assets, which are employees, and to defer capital. So what's going on with that right now? So up until this point, we've been spending less than our sister cities, right, per capita on capital. That has to change now because they weren't doing this. They've been fine this whole time. They had strong fund balance positions. They had lower debt, right? The highest debt percentage at that time was about 10% of their budget. Ours was 25% of our budget, right? So they had a lot more capacity to fund CIP. We didn't. We've deferred, we kicked the can down the road when it came to capital, but again, we didn't have a choice. But that means we're gonna have to start ponying up a little bit more money now for capital spending. That's all that means. So there may be years where we're gonna exceed per capita spending of our sister cities for the first time, because we're starting from a much lower position. So that's what we have to keep reminding residents when they see a high dollar amount this year. Well, go back just a few years, there's a reason why it's a high dollar amount this year. That's the explanation. But we had to do that. This was the end result. When I walked here, we were negative $1 million. Now we're positive 17. We're actually positive $19 million, but that includes some CIP stuff, right? So we're at about 25% fund balance, okay? The target we had to get to for our creditors was 15%. We've exceeded that now. We're in a much better financial position. We've cut our debt by more than half, $85 million we've cut, from $160 million down to $74.7 million. So we're retiring our debt. And again, the plan was to retire it for the FY30, so we had capacity for facility borrowing. What I'm telling you though right now is we're gonna have to borrow probably double what I thought we would before, okay? So you look at some other jurisdictions now who are doing facility assessments on their schools and what it's gonna take to renovate. The numbers are scary. The prices have just gone up dramatically, okay? We're a small city with the weakest tax base still in all Northern Virginia, right? We're gonna have to figure out how to pay for this stuff. So that's kind of the context of the CIP, but in reality, the meat and potato for the Planning Commission is the projects, right? You have those in front of you. You had them over the weekend to look at. We have the staff here to kind of answer any questions you guys have on individual projects and whether you believe they bring value to the community or not, to have any additional requests you have of us in terms of analysis for the March meeting or for the April meeting when I finally have revenues, right, to present to you all. Please let us know tonight. Sarah will take good notes so we can get back with you all on additional things, okay? Any questions of me before we turn it over to Q&A for specific departments?
Questions from commissioners?
Yeah, I have a question, Laszlo. Just to summarize, the bottom line, I think, of what you're saying is taking out the two big projects, the new fire station or the renovated fire station.
The addition.
The addition, and the CTE, the schools, CTE. That bogey is 67 million, or 64 million, I think you had on your slide. And you're expecting that the revenues are likely to come in around 50 million.
No. So I don't know what the revenues are going to come in. What I'm telling you is whatever the revenues come in, it'll be balanced for the city. So whatever the expenditure is going to be, it's going to have to be reduced to match the revenues, or we're going to be able to do more based off the revenue. So I can't tell you what that is right now.
Understood, but
Yeah.
you think that that's going to lead to somewhere around 47, 50 million
Yeah, around there.
for CIP
Correct.
budget?
Correct.
Which means we'll need to shed from the list of projects, which I think these are all good projects. We'll need to shed from the list of projects somewhere around 14, 15, 16 million, probably, based on your estimate, where you think the numbers will be.
Well,
And
no,
that's,
it's more than that.
More-
Yeah, it's about 38 million.
okay.
Yeah.
Well,
38 to 40 million is what we're going to have to shed. I told you the two projects that are going to get us there, or close to that, right? And the third, that's another one as well, the turf fields.
Right.
That will get us there.
okay.
But it's your
I
discretion.
wasn't including those two projects.
Yeah.
The two big projects, the CTE and the renovation of the fire department, so.
Yeah. So, but no, starting from the point of what was presented tonight, what I believe we're going to have to get to balance the budget again is anywhere between cutting 38 to 40 million dollars of what you have in front of me today.
Okay, so the point.
I presented you three projects that likely
Sure.
would be there.
So
Yeah.
the point being is that we would, to get our wish list, we would have to increase revenue significantly
Yeah.
to get our wish list. And that comes through landing additional businesses, I presume?
It's really types of businesses. So you can land all the businesses you want. Those are microscopic in terms of the revenues when it compares to real estate taxes that we're getting across the board. It's game-changing businesses that we're looking to get that are really going to drive the success here. So the downtown is great. It will help us out financially. It's a good community effort as well. But it's not the game changer we would need to really address all of our capital.
And whenever you say game-changing businesses, can you define?
I cannot, no. Those would have to be big revenue-generating
Okay.
businesses. Yeah.
Okay.
More than a restaurant, right? Restaurants are great. Meals taxes are wonderful. But I'm always going to be realistic with you. The numbers there, even if we get to like a much more robust, with our competitors, you'd multiply our meals tax revenues by 4 or 5. You're just talking about a few $1 million a year. It's not what's, and remember that you guys are just looking at the CIP right now. What we also have to talk about when it comes to the governing body is, hey, tax rate reductions, right? That reduces your revenues, but that's a priority of our residents. We also have to talk about spending increases in terms of salaries, because we keep losing our employees to other jurisdictions who are raising their salaries. We live in a market, in terms of labor market, right, where we have to stay competitive. So those are all things that we have to factor in. Retiring our debt still, continuing to build our robust surpluses so we could try to get to close as possible, if not get to AAA, right? But our creditors are quite clear. You're on the right path. You're reducing your debt. You're increasing your fund balance. We start turning that around, right? They're going to start raising red flags, and our credit score is going to drop again. So we have to be careful with that. So there's a lot more than just the CIP. The CIP is one piece, and it's the most expensive piece, especially when you start talking about facility renovations, because that's what drives debt. So that's what we have to figure out how to pay for. And the downtown is a big piece of stabilizing our finances. It helps us get a little bit more competitive with some of the other jurisdictions, but we're not going to get close to where we need unless we have some game-changing businesses here. And we're looking. We're constantly looking for that. Yeah.
Other questions?
Just a quick question. You talk a lot about ARPA funds and continuing to use ARPA funds. Are the city's ARPA funds fully obligated, or is there some sitting waiting for projects to be
Well,
developed?
they're budgeted for.
Budgeted.
They're not. So once once FY25 is approved, then yeah, they've all been appropriated at that point, right? But that hasn't been done yet. So we'll close FY24 budget also and see how much we have remaining, and then we'll augment that in the FY25 budget. But contractually, we have to be done by like November.
Yeah.
We have to be in contract for spending all that money by November. You can keep using the money for 2 years after that,
Right.
but it has to be to fund an existing contract by no later than this November.
Okay, thank you.
And following up on that question, and for our citizens' benefit, can you talk a little bit about ARPA funds and, how do you land ARPA funds, and are there any rules and restrictions and things like that?
Yeah, so I'd invite you to look at my ARPA budget on the website, but it's a one-time money that came from the federal government for COVID-19 response, and there were restrictions on what we could spend it on. Public health, the two biggest, easiest kind of things that we could do were Parks and Rec and Fire Department, right, that were justifiable. You also had some money that you can count as revenue loss as well, and that you were flexible to use across the board. They changed the regulations a few months ago to also allow you to do transportation spending with it as well. So remember I said 1.6 million of the 100 million is paid by the city. Actually, some of that's actually ARPA funded also. So it's not all city. So we're using money that comes from ARPA as well now for transportation. We use a lot of that for those pay raises. We reduced the gap snapshot time FY23 for our employees with our market competitors by about 75%. Not 100%, we didn't match our sister city competitors, but we reduced the gap by about 75% back then. Guess what they all did? Yeah, so we fell further behind, but at least instead of it going like this, we kind of brought it up the curve, and we're getting closer now to those other jurisdictions, but we use a lot of the ARPA funding for that as well. So.
And I take it there's no more ARPA funds available at this point? Or?
They're available, but the governing body just approved the most recent ARPA budget framework back in December. Yeah.
Okay. Because one thing that dawned on me as I was looking at this is I said, gee, why can't we get more ARPA funds?
We can't. It was just a one-time contribution from the federal
Okay.
government. But there are other grants that we can get. So we hired a grants consultant a few years ago, and there was questions back at that time, hey, is this going to work out? And it did. We brought in a lot of multi-million dollars to the city from that, not just for transportation, but good examples of the fire department. The 15 staff now that are geared towards staffing the ladder truck came from a safer federal grant that's paying all their salaries. So that was a huge win as well. So every department, PD's done a lot of work with our grants consultant to secure a COPS hiring grant to get more officers on the streets as well. They've gotten a lot of SRO grants, so we have an SRO now in every single one of our school campuses as well. So there's a lot of grants that we've been winning the last few years that we want to keep winning. But they're competitive, they're tough. It's a lot of work also on the finance department, right? So there's a breaking point where we can't take any more, because there's a lot of compliance reporting, or we're gonna have to hire additional finance staff for compliance if we start winning even more grants as well, because the federal government requires a lot of compliance reporting.
Thank you.
So but that's a wonderful point, like I said, grants are another piece to help us out with capital. The problem is that you don't get grants for the most expensive things, which are facilities. There are no grants, federal grants for that. There's USDA, a 40-year loan for rural town halls, right? There's not a lot of grants for facilities that are relevant to us. So that means city taxpayers have to pay for that. One piece of legislation that the General Assembly is considering right now is giving every locality a referendum option for sales tax, for an additional 1% of sales tax for schools' capital project funding. That's about $120 million over a life of a loan. So when we start looking at price tags for renovations, that one thing would save taxpayers a lot of money. And the beautiful thing about sales tax is real estate tax, we know who pays that 100%. Residents. Who pays sales tax? Mix, non-residents and residents. So the sales tax is the better way to generate tax revenues to pay for our school's capital than real estate tax. We want to reduce that real estate tax rate for our residents, go with the sales tax. So I'm hoping the General Assembly passes that. If not, I'm going to recommend for the governing body for our legislative agenda next year to at least list Manassas Park, because I believe there's 6 jurisdictions already who have that authority. We want to add Manassas Park to that, because I don't know how we're going to pay for our schools, right? This is one mechanism. So we're always going to look at mechanisms that we can take advantage of to help do the math of reducing tax rates, which is decreasing revenues, while increasing spending.
That's great. Thank you very much.
I'm going to delete these slides so that your numbers on your handout match here. So if you have a question about a specific slide, we can go to that slide. Okay.
Are there any specific questions from commissioners for different sections, or are we good for now? Okay.
I'm good.
I think I have a couple questions. Let's see. With regards to the fleet, the enterprise fleet plan, and I don't know who to address this question to. Is this to you, Laszlo?
Well, it's Keith if he's on the Teams call, but I may be able to answer it depending on what the question is. Keith is my deputy city manager. He's the one tactically working on the fleet stuff, but I was the one who brought Enterprise here, because before all of our vehicles were, Chief Evans remembers this, 1999, 2000, 2001, 18 to 20 years old, and replacement was just going to be astronomical. We partnered with the company Enterprise, which does the rent-a-cars, but their name is Enterprise for a reason. They actually do capital leasing of fleet for large companies and governments, and we take advantage of their better prices because of their economies of scale. And we entered into this program here to essentially replace our vehicles, modernize them, which actually reduce fuel costs, reduce maintenance costs as well. So we save money on that end, plus a replacement cycle so that we maximize our equity. Because if you're selling a car that's from year 2001 right now, you're not getting a lot of return, right? If you're selling a car that's only 5-6 years old, you're capitalizing a lot of return on investment there to go back into the fund, so you reduce your pricing essentially for the burden essentially of replacing those vehicles. So now we have a more modern fleet. We did the projections. It was a few years ago. We saved the city about $1 million over 10 years by going this route. So that's kind of the overarching framework. But tactically, if you have questions about specific vehicles, that would be one of the departments, or some of the specifics about the program. That would be Keith.
So that was going to be one of my questions. On the vehicles, I noticed some of the vehicles that we're replacing over the next 5 years appeared to not be among the fleet vehicles.
Oh, they're additions. You're saying they're not existing fleet. They're just new vehicles that we're getting that aren't replacing an older vehicle. Is that your question?
No, it seemed like on one of the later slides, under the community development, there were fleet vehicles that it was unclear to me whether they were also going to be under the enterprise program.
Yeah, that's a good question. So think of the enterprise program as what's called the white fleet. That's SUV and below. SUV, smaller pickup trucks, sedans, right? Bigger trucks that Calvin's team, Public Works crew is going to have, or ambulances, fire stations, or fire engines, ladder trucks. Enterprise doesn't do those. They just kind of do SUV and below.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, and that's why the school buses aren't part of the
Correct.
fleet
Yep.
vehicles, is the enterprise plan as well. Okay,
Yes.
gotcha. That was my guess, but that's why I was trying to clarify. Thank you.
Commissioner Mensing?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. The first one is for fire. I love the plan for your addition and your remodel. I also like the mention that you are studying an additional station for each side. I'm assuming the tracks are the number one obstacle, or is Route 28 also?
The tracks, Route 28, all the additional growth that's happened in all of the cities since, 2010?
Yeah.
Something we've been playing catch-up with.
So my question is, and I know that you're going to study it, but I'm just wondering what you're thinking. 2 is going to be enough? It seems like we have 3 parts of the city that are kind of equally hard to
I
access.
think with the size of the city, 2 would be adequate.
Okay.
I look at what Manassas City, look at the size of Manassas City is.
Yeah.
They have 2. They're just trying to strategically relocate their stations within their boundaries to get the proper response times. That's all we're trying to look to do, is make sure we get the proper response times within our city.
And all of our sister cities have too, right? Like Fairfax City.
Fairfax City
Yeah.
has 2.
Yeah.
And so they're operating with 2.
And when I say sister cities, just for everyone's, we're talking about Manassas, Fairfax City, Falls Church, and sometimes we look at Fredericksburg as part of that as well. Like Alexandria is much larger. They're a totally different scale. We don't look at the counties. Again, they're a much different scale from. So our peers are those sister cities that we talked about.
And Prince William County is doing the study for us?
So Prince William County is actually doing their own study of where to locate fire stations. And in a meeting with the fire chief, I meet with the fire chief from Prince William and Manassas regularly. The fire chief said, hey, look, at no additional cost to you, because I'm already doing the study. If it's okay with you guys, I'll just have the consultants look at your cities and kind of give you the recommendations of where we think they should be based off populations and different types of businesses or whatever's there. It's like, if you're gonna do it for free of charge, then
Yeah, that's great.
take a look at the city and tell us. 'Cause, I mean, they've really helped Manassas with locating their first station over there by the fairgrounds.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That was my question. Let's
Go
see.
ahead. I was going to follow on that
Oh, yeah,
question.
sorry.
The Connor Drive extension that builds an overpass over the train tracks, does that impact your plans at all? Or, I mean, I suspect that makes things better for you, right?
It makes them better, but.
Because you can
we're
definitely
still gonna ask
access
for-
without train traffic.
Yeah, it's about, what is it, a 7-minute, like, so when the arms are stuck down, or if there's a train that's blocking it, I think it increases response times to the Blooms area of our fire, I want to say about 7 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
That, in 7 minutes, when you're under cardiac arrest, or stroke or whatever, is critical.
Yeah,
Yeah, 'cause there's-
absolutely.
There's no one close to the east end of our city. If you have to come off of, if we have to go all the way around and come back around, you have Buck Hall who has to come down Moore Drive and all the back streets, or Manassas City who has to come all the way through Signal Hill Road and come over, so there's really no shortcut to get there. So that would be a nice feature, but it'd be nice to have something on that side of the city and maybe even have it as a, public safety center so the chief can have to send all his officers back across town, so that'd be a great.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mensing?
Yeah, my next question is on, actually, there's no page numbers, so I don't know. Connor Drive extension, this one, the traffic circle?
Yeah.
Is that really grant funded? It says grant funded. Have we secured that?
We've secured parts grants for like the study
Okay.
component of it, right? The rest of it, no. So that's gonna, again, we're assuming we're gonna get it, right? we're going to definitely look at federal rails administration. There's been a lot of talks now. There's concerns across the country of these at-grade crossings.
Right.
And trains, derailments or being stuck, and school buses, fire engines, et cetera, not having ways to, residents having ways to kind of cross. I mean, think about our elementary schools are over there in Blooms, right?
Yeah.
So think of all the people on the west side when the tracks are now. And every time that has happened, like when we closed for reconstruction there for about a month, if you drove on Liberia Avenue those days, it was a
miserable.
nightmare.
Yeah.
It was a nightmare. But then, so all of our school buses had to deal with that. Our fire engines and medics, our police, our public works. Think about plowing snow, right? When they have to take back, when they have to go back and refill, driving back all the way to the west side, and they're on the east. How long that takes? Have additional fuel, right? So there has to be something done. We did the initial feasibility study that looked at it, and really you can see it. There's an example of it on Liberia Avenue, right? When you're crossing the same tracks on Liberia, you can see that the Dominion power lines are actually a little bit more raised. Actually, not that by that much, and we're talking with them right now because in 2025 they're going to be replacing these power lines over here. So we're actually asking them, hey, can you raise them up as well to give us that option as well? And it's actually not. It doesn't look like it's that big of a lift for them to do that. So there's an opportunity here. We just have to be aggressive with the grants.
Okay, well, good, that's good to know.
And again, the beauty of that too is when we do the town halls and residents are concerned, well, you're doing all these, if you do these downtown festivals or the theaters here and there's a lot more traffic in Manassas Drive, I need to get to 28. This option here, you just go on Connor Drive now to get to 28. And now that we've connected Connor to 28, now it's a new option for people who want to bypass the downtown to get to 28. And I'm not worried about reducing traffic counts on Manassas Drive because really the key traffic counts that we look at for the downtown is 28, not Manassas Drive, because we're going to be putting up business signage on 28 to direct people to the downtown. That's where you get 55,000 cars per day. That's what businesses need. So that's where you got to have your business advertisement is on 28.
And that's in this fiscal year? I don't know.
The sign, yeah, we're currently, right now, we're in what's called phase 2. So we've designed, you've seen kind of images of what these look like. We've designed what they are, or what they look like. Now they're going out soon over the next few months, and they're going to do Miss Utility, looking at all utility lines, actually pinpointing where these signs are going to be, doing all the specs, so we can actually issue an RFP for someone to come out, construct the signs, and install them. And it will also include monument signs saying "Welcome to Manassas Park." Right, which we don't have, right? So we want to let people know you're coming into Manassas Park. It'll include an option for a screen as well,
Good.
Where we can showcase, pictures of the city, the downtown, any community information that we want to get out there as well. So all that's under plan right now. It's in the CIP as well for FY25 to keep working on it, on that project.
My next question is the Manassas Park Trails connectivity. It says $0 in FY25. Is that because it's grant, or we're holding off until 26?
It's grant funded, yeah.
Do you know about how much of grant we're using this year for that? Or
Oh, no, we're not, I don't think we have any projects related to that this year, because we haven't received.
In 25, I'm sorry.
Oh, in 26, you mean, how much we're doing, or?
Oh, no, so in 25, it's 0 because we're not doing anything?
Correct, we don't have the funding to, yeah. It doesn't mean we won't do anything. We can certainly come to the governing body, or you guys can recommend to the governing body, hey, I will say this, we are trying to get a grant to study the pedestrian crossing on 28, whether it's like a bridge or something like
good.
that. We're trying to secure that grant.
Okay.
At least for 25, just we're waiting for that one.
Okay.
So that might be one thing we are doing with the implementation of that plan.
Okay. My next, it's not really a question, I guess just a comment for follow-up later, is as we were talking about the speed humps the other day, is just to evaluate all 3 options so that we know which one is the best to take, the speed humps or the road diet or the road slimming with the bicycle lane.
Oh, okay.
So compare and contrast the 3 projects.
Okay, so you'd want us to have the contractor come back with those options?
Yeah, I think before we go ahead and put in the humps, we should, because
Okay,
I know we had
think that's a
talked
good idea.
about.
Yeah, that's,
Okay,
especially the bike lanes. I mean, that might be
yes, I think that would
the
probably be the way to
lowest
go.
burden,
Yes.
right, on everyone. I think some people are going to be frustrated with the speed humps. Again, I brought that back
Right.
to you all because I had to hear it from the residents on the east who are concerned about the speeding.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a good phased approach where we do first do the bike lanes and see
Right.
what that does. So we
Yeah.
can, Calvin, we can ask Steve maybe to have the contractor follow up with that comparison as
That
well
would be
as an
great.
option. Yeah.
Thanks. And then, I guess, and then you kind of alluded that we'll be talking about this later, so maybe I should save it for later, but I was wondering what the high school security entrance status was.
If you want, do you want to? Okay, Chief, do you know what I haven't been briefed or Mark on it recently. I know, so most of the enhancements are done, all the ballistics and everything else. There was an issue with the high school entrance that's being redone now. You know, Chief, where we're at with that one? If you would come up to the mic.
Sorry.
Point is, that project's not done, but all the cameras are in place.
Good. Okay.
The card readers are in place. Most of the ballistics and glass have been in place. It's just the high school entrance where we're having issues.
Okay,
Yeah, so the entrance went from like 4 or 5 doors down to 2, which created a bottleneck. So what the contractor did was remove the doors that they installed, and now they're looking at wider doors or potentially moving it on the outside of it. So
Okay.
depending on cost, it looks like we're gonna probably go with the wider doors and open it up. So they're working with the contract now to find a plan with that.
okay, great, thank you.
Commissioner Beckett, Commissioner Evans, do you have any questions?
No additional questions.
Good.
Oh, I have one last.
Please, go ahead.
Okay. The property demolition line, is that ever gonna reach like a cap?
So we keep 25,000, but we usually zero it out each year unless we know there's a
Okay.
target upcoming.
Sure, yeah.
At this moment, I don't think, Calvin, we have any targets that legally we can really
good.
even target, so, which is good
Hey,
news.
it's a
We
good
we
thing.
tackled the two that were
Yes.
serious issues, and we're keeping it there just in case
Yes.
some of these abandoned homes get to that condition that we have to
Sure.
do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation this evening. We appreciate it, and we'll look forward to the March follow-up for our meeting then, too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving along, we have no unfinished business, no report of special committees. With Administrator Barry not here, we'll just hold off on any informational.
Can I just do one thing?
Oh,
Can I
please, go
just
ahead.
walk everyone,
Oh,
any
please.
resident watching, like how to find the current comprehensive plan?
Yes.
Okay. And again, an update is badly needed.
We very much appreciate that. Thank you for having that as a formal moving forward on it.
All right, so when you come to our website, you go to Department, and you're gonna go down to Development, Zoning, and Code Enforcement. All right, so it's gonna be under the zoning section. Planning and zoning, and you have comprehensive plan right there. So with the comprehensive plan, it lives with the planning and zoning department always, in any jurisdiction you're gonna go to, that's where it is. So you go to the comprehensive plan, and it has every chapter in here. I will note, the governing body asks that we do a summary of the comprehensive plan, so Diane, our assistant city planner, she's working right now on developing a summary Word document and a summary PowerPoint that really just synthesizes the key highlights of the comprehensive plan. So when that's available, we'll let you know as well, and that'll be hopefully an easier read for residents as well.
Good. A good way to introduce it.
Yes, yep.
Good.
But when you look at a lot of the background information, the tables and everything, they're all out of date.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Then I have no other agenda items here, so would anyone care to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion, second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The time is 7:52.
Wow.
So much better.